a dialogue here together. Brendon, maybe you could just give us a wave here.
Yeah, hi. It's really great to be here. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm always eager to talk about birds and how we can all make London a more bird-friendly city. So it's great to meet you all.
So Brendon and I are going to jump into an in-conversation dialogue. I have a few questions that I will ask him, and hopefully his responses will be a great introduction to these bird-friendly initiatives. So first of all, Joanna um, mentioned that, and I mentioned that you have done research about this role of the avian visual system in preventing bird window collisions. So that's sort of a mouthful there. Maybe you can tell us about this a little bit more.
Sure. So if you think about it from the perspective of the bird, flying into a window, or rather not flying into a window, is really a visual problem, right? It's kind of like if you were driving on the highway and you needed to avoid taking your car off the median or taking a wrong turn, you really need to see what's right up in front of you. And this is a tricky thing because birds are flying at very high speed. They're flying through an artificial environment. Um, and they also, many of them have eyes on the sides of their head. And unfortunately, we haven't really done a great job up until now in the scientific community of thinking about the collisions issue from an avian visual perspective, as in how birds actually see windows on buildings, or if you're going to put a treatment on a window for preventing collisions, how that's going to stand out to a bird. And so my research aims to combine sort of the theoretical knowledge we have about how birds see with new methods for actually testing the effectiveness of glass treatments. If we put different materials up in front of a bird and have them fly towards them and have to make a choice of which way they want to go, we can use those choices to improve our understanding of what birds actually can see and avoid while they're moving around.
That's great. So in sort of the long term, how are you hoping that this research specifically is going to help birds, and what do you hope to apply your research to?
So I think that this is the awareness of this issue of birds crashing into windows has just exploded in the last few years, and I'm very grateful for that. Birds have been crashing into windows for well over a century, but really only now is the public waking up, and we see legislators are taking an interest in this. For instance, there's a petition to update the Ontario Building Code to require the use of bird-friendly materials in all new buildings. That would be awesome if we could do that. At the same time, we need to make sure that what we're putting on our windows are actually going to be effective at preventing collisions. Unfortunately, there have been a few different things people have tried over the years. They'll slap, a sticker in the shape of a hawk up on their window because somebody at a hardware store told them that this is the solution. And unfortunately, we know now that that doesn't work. But there's a lot of misinformation out there. And so for consumer confidence, we need to be clear on what is going to be effective. But also for the sake of the birds that we're trying to conserve, it is really important that these new structures are made bird friendly in a way that is actually true to the name. I also think that a lot of this relies on public awareness. I think that when we're talking about new buildings, you can speak to the people designing the building about using bird-friendly materials, but we know that a lot of collisions happen at existing buildings, in particular homes. And so many of the actions to keep birds safe around home windows are voluntary, and we need the public to understand what they can do to contribute. Um, the more I study this problem, the more I realize that it's not so much a problem of the birds, it's a problem of human psychology and changing behavior and inspiring people to do the right things and access the right information. And so I'm quite interested in talking to members of the public and learning about what would it take for you to make your windows on your home bird friendly. Um, yeah.
That's great. Really, community awareness is sort of key here for having this bird-friendly community. So we're so excited that so many of you have joined us tonight for that aspect. So Brendon, you're also involved in quite a few bird-related causes within London. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more about those initiatives.
Yeah, I would be happy to. So the City of London is doing really great work developing what they've called their Bird Friendly Skies program. And the Bird Friendly Skies program is really designed around preventing or reducing the risk of birds colliding with windows on buildings. Andrea was really heavily involved in developing this from the start. I sort of joined a little bit later. And so that has been in the works for a couple of years. The first piece of that involves changing how we install light fixtures outside to reduce the likelihood of light spilling up into the night sky. As I'll talk about a little bit later, light pollution at night is really damaging for birds, and it is a cause of collisions that happen at night. So also encouraging the public to turn off their lights when they're not needed at night is a big piece of that program. The second piece is still in progress, and that is going to require the use of bird-friendly materials and new site plans. So I have a feeling in the next year or two, you're going to start to see many more bird-friendly structures appearing in London. So the Bird Friendly Skies program I have been working on for a while now. I'm really proud of a new initiative that I've been involved with called London's Bird Friendly City Team. And so this is a program by Nature Canada, where synchronously in cities all across Canada, you have groups of people coming together and moving the meter on bird conservation issues locally. And so we do a number of different things in London to improve public awareness of threats to birds, to provide the public with access to educational opportunities, and just do the best we can to make London bird friendly. The goal is to have London become certified under this program sometime in the next year.
That's awesome. That's something that we're both really keen on having that occur. London birds are very lucky to have Brendon as as an advocate for them.
Thank
One
you.
final thing that we'll touch on. So you've done quite a bit of research on birds. Are there specific birds that you've enjoyed studying or working with? What's sort of your favorite research bird here?
Oh man. So my background with birds comes from my work. I have pet parrots and I love them to bits, but you don't see very many parrots around in London. The birds that I fell in love with when I moved to London a few years ago are actually of the family aerial insectivores. So aerial insectivores are, as the name implies, birds that eat insects while they're flying. Aerial insectivore. And London has a number of really meaningful conservation initiatives for aerial insectivores, in part because they've declined precipitously in the last half century. Many species like the chimney swift and the barn swallow and the bank swallow and the cliff swallow and purple martins have declined by over 90% from their former abundance. And so I have really enjoyed participating in Nature London's chimney swift monitoring program. I go around the city in the summertime. Once a week in the evening, we go and we park ourselves in front of a chimney, often in front of an elementary school or the Labatt's Brewery, and we count the number of chimney swifts that land inside the chimney for the night. The most I ever counted was something in the range of 1,400 birds in one
Wow.
chimney entering in the span of 10 minutes. It was pretty incredible.
Wow.
But aerial insectivores are really special birds to me. I'm always excited when I can photograph them and hear success stories about their conservation locally.
That's great. And this is even an opportunity to see those aerial insectivores for many members of the public as well, if they're interested in doing so. That
Mhm.
was really great. I think to share a little bit more information on the importance of being bird friendly, Brendon has put together a brief presentation for us this evening. So I'll ask Brendon to begin sharing his screen and he can begin his presentation here.
Alrighty, can everybody see a blank screen right now? That's good. We're off to a good start. All right, so today I'm going to talk to you about a few things that I hope can be useful for you in your personal mission to help birds. I'm going to start by addressing a couple leading sources of danger for birds, threats that we can manage within the built environment. So the first one, and this is perhaps the most controversial, is I want to draw attention to the risk to birds posed by cats. We know that cats are responsible for 2.6 approximately billion bird deaths. That's billion with a B in North America every single year. And in fact, you can break it down a little further than that into two types of cats that are harming birds. Those are feral cats. So those are cats that live outside and roam freely. They don't belong to anyone. And then domestic cats, which are pets that people allow to roam outside. Just to illustrate the scope of this problem, these were animals that were brought into a wildlife rehab in California. These animals were all killed by cats in the span of 1 year. And we see similar statistics like this coming out of Salthaven and other organizations working in this space here in Ontario. Something that people often are surprised about is that wind turbines, we talk about a lot for being dangerous for birds, they rank very low on the list compared to these other sources like cats and windows. Roaming cats outside face a number of dangers. And so if you love your pet cat, I really encourage you to think about the risk you're taking by letting it go outside. In London, cats have been picked up by bald eagles, like in the top left corner. We have a record number of bald eagles in London this year, according to the Christmas bird count. Very exciting for the eagles, not so much for the cats. Coyotes are also a major threat to cats here in London. Cats also pose a big danger to each other. Many cats get into fights with other cats that are territorial, and many cats end up, unfortunately, suffering fatal encounters with vehicles. So the life expectancy of your cat will be longer on average if you keep it inside. Now, many people will say, well, my cat really likes going outside. And so, there are solutions that will allow your cat to continue to be out there. One is to train your cat to wear a leash or harness. If you can start your cat on this earlier, that's great, especially for kittens. It just teaches them that this is a normal part of their routine. You can incorporate treats to encourage them. There's lots of good tutorials online. Or you can build a structure dedicated for your cat called a catio. And there's a number of variants of this. You can build a giant palace for your cat, or even a small carrier would suffice. Collisions with windows are another major source of mortality for birds, and they're what I study. I'm just going to briefly touch on specifically why birds hit windows. Most of the time that birds hit windows, it takes place during the daytime. And the reason is because birds do not understand the concept of a reflection on glass. Specifically, birds see extensions of their habitat. So for instance, this is a building on campus at Western University. Birds would see the reflection of the tree and not understand that that's not a real tree. They're going to try and fly towards that. And it sort of makes sense. Even we do not see glass. It's sort of this invisible thing. We come to understand glass through our experiences, but it's not something that would occur naturally. We also tend to think of collisions as being a problem posed by high-rise buildings like One London Place in downtown London, shown here. Unfortunately, that's not true. These kinds of buildings only account for a really tiny fraction of collision mortality. Most of the time birds hit windows, it's happening on homes or low-rise buildings, which are far more numerous. Most of the time a bird hits a window, it's going to be at or below the height of the surrounding trees near the building. One other driver of collisions is artificial light at night. I mentioned earlier as part of London's BirdFriendly Skies program. I drew this little comic which explains the problem. When birds are migrating, they rely on cues in the night sky to know where they're going, the stars, the moon, where the sun is rising and setting. And when they reach a city that's really polluted by light at night, they get very disoriented by that. And this can cause them to collide with windows on buildings. The elegant and simple and cost-effective solution really is to just turn the lights off when you don't need them, and especially during bird migration in spring and fall. Another major driver of bird decline is that birds are losing habitat. This photo represents what our region in southwestern Ontario would have looked like not that long ago, especially in the span of birds' evolutionary history here in North America. This is what you might find here, something that looks like a Carolinian forest. And in just a short time, we have heavily modified the landscape to become more friendly for humans. So this is what London looked like back in 1872. It was still reasonably small there, but still a real departure from the forest on the last slide. And if you fast forward to now, I mean, the urban sprawl has really just exploded. The map that I showed you just now is represented by the yellow box in the bottom right. And so we have really removed a lot of habitat for birds. However, in London, we are making really good efforts to conserve patches of habitat for birds. So our environmentally significant areas are really, really important vestiges of that habitat for birds. And so I've just listed some of them here. I want to emphasize something about environmentally significant areas. Um, of course, I showed you that habitat for birds used to encompass our entire region, but now birds are sort of expected to stay inside these patches. And unfortunately, that doesn't work because birds move around a lot, especially if they're migratory. I like to think about this in sort of the same way we think about airplanes. We know that at any given moment in time, our continent is just a flurry of aerial activity. We've got planes coming and going, landing near airports. And so I wonder, can we adapt some of this thinking to learn how to share our airspace in our city with birds, particularly migratory birds? And so the analogy I like to give is that our ESAs for birds are kind of like the blue dots representing airports that you see on the map, because that's where birds are going to be landing and taking off. And we need to think about safety around our ESAs, just like we think about safety around our airports. I'm going to give Westminster Pond's ESA as an example because a lot of birds live here. I've shown on the map 4 yellow stars. These represent places where people have put retrofits on glass windows that were known to be killing birds. And I think that's a really important and impactful step. We need to recognize that dangers for birds can also be surrounding the ESAs, not just inside them. But it's these neighborhoods, the ones that are clustered right next to the ESA, where we need to concentrate our efforts on reaching out to members of the public, letting them know about the dangers of having their cats roam outside, treating their windows, that sort of information. The last thing I want to mention is that we can really enhance habitat for birds in our own backyards. And we can do that through landscaping and low impact landscaping. So one example, which is quite timely, around this time of year when the weather gets nice, people get excited and they want to go outside and they want to start raking the leaves and, making their yard look pretty again. And I want to emphasize, that is wonderful. I need you to hold off a little bit. I need you to wait just a couple more weeks. And the reason for that is because many critters, including insects that birds rely on for food, are still hibernating. They're still sleeping under the leaf litter in the soil. And if you start to remove the leaf litter too early, you end up discarding this really precious food for early migratory species that are arriving here and depend on that niche. So for example, here are bumblebees that are hibernating in soil. This is super common, and they rely on that layer of insulation provided by leaf litter to stay warm. Similarly, if you have native grasses in your yard, you want to keep those a little bit longer because they are havens for hibernating insects. So avoid cutting those down for just a little bit. I just want to illustrate what I mean. This is a hermit thrush. This is an early migrant species, and you might see it sort of patting its feet down. What it's actually doing is searching for bugs in the soil. And so this is a really important food source for many migratory birds. For London, in terms of when you can rake your leaves safely, we are in the hardiness zone 6A. So what that means is that the last frost for us occurs around May 1st to 10th. That is when it is okay for you to rake your leaves without harming birds or their habitat. So those are all the slides that I had prepared for my mini presentation. Thank you for listening.
That's wonderful. The graphics there and the information presented is super helpful, I'm sure, to many participants in our Zoom chat here. Thanks, Brendon.
Welcome.
Now Brendon and I are going to put some of this information into action. So we have prepared a couple of demonstrations to show you how easy it is to add these bird-friendly retrofits to your window. So first, I'm going to start off with the feather-friendly marker tape, which is so easy to apply and is also available as one of our prize giveaways for a few lucky listeners this evening. So for those of you who may not be lucky enough to win, it's also important noting that it is available at Featherfields and also Wild Birds Unlimited within London. So give me a moment here. I'm going to switch gears. We've got a couple of glass panes that have been donated for us. And I'm just going to really quickly demonstrate how easy it is to add these bird-friendly decals. So this is a pane of glass that I have here. I just have a piece of cardboard behind it so that you can see it a little bit better. One important thing when we are applying these bird-friendly decals to windows, the important thing first is that we're working on a clean surface. So if you're adding these decals to your windows, you want to make sure that you're cleaning the exterior of the window. And the other important thing is that we are actually adding these individual decal stickers to the exterior of the window. So oftentimes we want to put decals on the inside because it's a little bit easier, but in fact, you're still going to have a bit of a reflection if you have that decal on the inside. So what I've done here is our feather-friendly tape roll, which is your giveaway, comes on really easily. It comes on sort of a reel where we're actually applying these decals. So if I go up close, hopefully you can see that we're simply just peeling the tape and adding it to our glass. One important thing that we need to keep in mind is the distance and the spacing between these dots is very important to be in this 2" by 2" grid. So that 2" grid is basically what is allowing those birds to visualize and see that this is actually a solid surface. If we have those decals any farther apart, it's not effectively allowing those birds to determine that this is actually a solid surface. So with these feather-friendly tape rolls that you're seeing here, you're going to get the actual tape that it comes on. We also get a measuring unit so that we can measure our window, and also this device that just allows us to press it on. So what I would normally do if I'm retrofitting a window is you're just going to measure, again, make sure that it's this 2 by 2. You probably can't see my ruler there. But anyways, we can even make a mark at every 2" mark with a dry erase marker potentially. And we quite literally are just adding this on every 2 inches, sticking this actual tape on. It's important for this that we're using some type of a device to actually make sure that those stickers are effectively sticking to what you're trying to stick it to. And really easily, we're just pulling this tape off. Oops, that one didn't stick. I didn't stick it down hard enough. But now you can hopefully see that, well, we've got a bit of a glare. But now we have this really easily distinguishable grid for those birds to determine that this is in fact a solid surface. Another important point to note here is that this is hardly visible to the human eye. So unless you're sort of up close looking at this glass, it's really difficult to tell that you have these decals on. Now I'll send it over to Brendon. He's got some other demos that he's going to share with us.
Sure thing. I'm just trying to share my video. There we go. Great. Couple things I just want to mention about feather-friendly DIY. You need to apply it when it's 8 degrees or warmer. That's quite important, or the dots don't adhere so well. Andrea mentioned it's a good idea to clean and dry your window beforehand. And there's information in the link that I posted in the chat, which specifies how much coverage you get for each roll. Feather-friendly also offers their product in sort of a commercial format, so you can buy larger rolls of window film. Say you have like a really big window that you need treated, that might be more economical or practical in certain situations. So I'm going to give a demonstration of a couple things. I also have panes of glass here. They were generously donated by Synergy Windows and Doors for this demo. You don't need to use feather-friendly as the one-stop shop for treating your windows. There are all kinds of other things you can do to make your windows bird-friendly. One example is you can hang pieces of string or cord every 4 inches on the outside of the glass. That does the same thing. Another thing that you can do is you can just draw on your windows. And I've been really curious about this because I haven't been able to find much information online about what materials are best for drawing on windows. Because if you think about it, it's going to be exposed to weather and ultraviolet from the sun. And so that inspired me as part of this presentation to conduct a mini experiment. And so I went and ordered a bunch of different types of markers and pens, and these are all rated for use on glass. But I thought, let's try this out and see how well these actually apply to the glass. And my plan is I'm going to leave these outside in my backyard for the next several months and expose them to the elements. And I'm going to report back to you guys about how well they did. So I've got a couple different types of oil-based markers here. One is by Sharpie. You can get this at Staples. I've got an acrylic marker. I've got what's called a liquid chalk marker, and I have what's called a China marker. And this is actually a form of wax. And so what I've done, I'm just going to tilt my camera, is similar to Andrea. I've got my pane of glass. I've basically just drawn vertical lines on here. So you can take a marker, might not dispense the way that I want. I've just got a little ruler here. You might have a better tool for it. And every 2 inches, you're just going to draw a white line like I've done here. And so you'd extend that all the way down. I did this one just a couple hours ago and it's already dried. Seems pretty durable. So we'll have to see. One of the markers that I tried, which I believe was this one, Flymax, came out a little bit messy. These are kind of imperfect and smudged. So anyway, it'll all be reported in my results later. I want to show you guys something else though, because I want to emphasize again that you can treat your windows in a number of ways that don't have to be dots, don't have to be lines. You can do whatever really suits your taste. So I'm just going to remove this one. So this was my crafting project this afternoon. Sometimes I do crafts and call it science. So I don't know how well you can see this. I just went crazy. I doodled flowers and bumblebees and all kinds of silly stuff on here. And I wanted to demonstrate that it doesn't really matter what you put on the glass, so long as you comply with those 2-inch spacing and uniform coverage rules. So Andrea mentioned that the dots are spaced 2 inches apart for feather friendly. The reason that that's important is because it's thought that when birds are flying towards a narrow opening, if it's under 2 inches wide, they're not going to try and fly through it. And it makes sense. A lot of the birds that hit windows are ones that hang out in the trees, and so they're used to dodging in between leaves and branches and things. But most of them cannot fit within 2 inches. That also protects the little tiny birds like hummingbirds and kinglets. And so making sure that you don't leave any big gaps on your design is really important, and making sure that you cover the entire window edge to edge, so that if you had, for instance, some markers on your glass over here, but not over here, the bird would probably just avoid it and smack through where there's an opening. You can also use other colors. So white tends to be the most popular because the inside of a building is usually darker, and so the glass appears dark. It provides that nice visual contrast that will stand out to a bird. But if you're dealing with something, let's say like a glass railing, where it's actually kind of invisible and the back of the glass is quite bright, you might want to use black instead, or something darker, or even incorporate colors. I mean, the sky is the limit. So there are all kinds of other ways to make your window bird friendly. I would encourage you to visit birdsafe.ca. I'll post a link in the chat so you guys can look at that after. I want to just move on now. I have a second demo that I'd like to share with you. And this is about how to keep birds healthy and safe near your feeders. A lot of people don't realize that when you're feeding birds in your backyard, the feeder just sits there. You're basically asking all of the birds to share the same fork. And I don't know about you, even in a not pandemic situation, but that would kind of gross me out. And so it's really important that when you are filling up your feeders, that you are washing your feeders properly, and I'm going to show you how. And also that you're monitoring your feeders when birds are coming and going to check for signs of contagious diseases. So in Canada and the United States right now, there are outbreaks of diseases at feeders being caused by salmonella. Many birds are prone to conjunctivitis, which looks like pink eye. So you might have birds at your feeders that have really crusty eyes and can't really move that well. It's rather important that you take your feeders down when you see that and give them a good wash. So I'm just going to show you quickly how I clean my feeder. It is very straightforward. You want to start with, I like to use a bucket of water, but you could also just do this in the shower or bathtub. You want to use a weak dilution of bleach. So I would say something like 5% would suffice. Many feeders look kind of like this. This is a squirrel buster. I like this one because it keeps the squirrels out. But at the bottom of the feeder, sort of on the inside, is where food debris tends to accumulate. So I'm just going to take this apart quickly. The lid comes off. So I would encourage you to submerge the entire base of this feeder. I'm just going to take the wing nut off to remove it. I would encourage you to submerge the entire base of the feeder inside the bleach solution, like so. And I would let it sit there for a few minutes. And then what I would encourage you to do is, using an old brush, you can use a toothbrush like this one, just go over all the surfaces that the birds perch on, anywhere they might have pooped, or on the inside if there are seeds stuck in there. Really get into the nooks and crannies where any debris could accumulate bacteria. And so once you've done that, give it a good soak in hot water. Give it a rinse afterwards to get any bleach out. And then you want to dry it before you're putting seeds in, or they're going to stick. But that's really it. Somebody also mentioned in the chat you need to change the food regularly. That is extremely important as well. Food can accumulate moisture and get moldy, particularly in warmer weather. So just keep a good eye on your feeder. Make sure things are kept clean, because we want healthy birds, right? Thanks.
That's great. Thanks, Brendon. We're eagerly awaiting to see what Brendon's long-term results are for those different markers that he's using. We're going to switch gears a little bit here. So we're going to preview our weekly virtual environmentally significant area visit. So each event throughout the month of April, I'm visiting an ESA within London and showing you some of the cool things that I come across there. So the goal of this is really to highlight the amazing ESAs that we have in London. Brendon alluded to those. We've got so many birds living in our ESAs, and we really encourage you to participate in the Environmentalist in Residence April Challenge, which I explain a little bit more about in the video. So I'm just going to share my screen here, and you'll be able to watch my virtual visit.
Hi everybody, Dr. Andrea Boyer here, your 2021 Environmentalist in Residence through the London Public Library in collaboration with the City of London. As you hopefully heard in my last video, every event that we're doing this month, I'm going to make a virtual visit for you to an environmentally significant area. Today, we're checking out the Coves, which is a really great area for lots of nature lovers and photographers. There's so much to see here. It's really amazing because the biodiversity and species richness is so high here, even considering it's just about 1 kilometer from the downtown core. So we're going to check out what I find today, and stay tuned, we'll see what we see. The body of water at the Coves is actually designated as an oxbow, which means it was basically eroded after many, many years off of the Thames River. Specifically, the Coves oxbow is made up of a series of 3 separate ponds, one of which I'm standing in front of now. The Coves contains 2 provincial potentially rare forest types. The first of which is black walnut forest, second of which is hackberry forest. This is a very old, very big common hackberry. Behind me you'll see quite a few different black walnut trees. This hackberry specifically has been designated by UTRCA as being a wildlife tree, basically meaning that it provides significant habitat, food and shelter for a variety of species. There's also a lot of wildlife that you can find at the coves. Hopefully you can see in the video, but there's a painted turtle right here. I've also come across in this area pie-billed grebes, wood ducks, and a couple muskrat. When you're visiting ESAs throughout the month of April for our Environmentalist in Residence Challenge, or really just the entirety of the year, make sure you're paying attention to these trail closed signs. Oftentimes they're closed for renaturalization to occur in the hopes of increasing that species diversity again. Thanks for visiting the coves with me today. We hope that you're getting out there and taking on the Environmentalist in Residence April Environmental Challenge. Again, we're encouraging you to get out to as many ESAs as you can. Take a picture in front of one of the signs, upload it to social media with the hashtag LDNESA, and you'll be entered in for a chance to win a lot of awesome environmental prizes. See you next week.
Okay, so hopefully you're all able to view our video there. Now I'll send it back over to Joanna.
Thanks, Andrea. Terrific. I love the virtual tours. So we are going to now open up questions for Brendon as well as Andrea. We have a few that have come in, so let's start with those. And this is specifically about residential windows on homes. And the question is, are residential windows with screens on the outside still dangerous for birds?
Interesting question. And this is something that I've chatted about recently with the experts at Flap Canada on this. So I believe that anything you put on the outside of your window is going to be better than nothing. With screens, what's actually happening is if a bird hits a screened window, the thinking is they're going to bounce off of it and they're less likely to be harmed. I've actually filmed this happening in a couple of backyard settings before, and the birds that struck the screen windows really do just bounce off and seem to be okay. But we don't really know yet if that actually deters birds, if it stands out to them enough that they say, oh, this is a solid thing that I can't fly through. So if you're having a lot of collisions, I would still recommend better to put visual markers to indicate to birds that there's something here, but as sort of a safety mechanism, screen can help quite a lot.
Thanks, Brendon. And we have another window question here. I'll read it out. So they're saying they have a basement walkout so that their second floor is really 3 floors off the ground. And they don't have a ladder that tall. So what would be some options for getting windows treated?
It's tough. So I think this is sort of a shortcoming of where we're at right now in this retrofit world. We have yet to come up with convenient solutions for upper floors of residences. In theory, if you have the means, hiring a contractor or a handy person that could come and get up on a ladder and put something on the outside of your window. I mean, I believe, I don't know the size of the window, but it would likely not cost a whole lot, and that would be the most effective thing. However, that's not always going to work for people. And so something that could go on the inside of the window would be really ideal. Unfortunately, there aren't many products out there on the market that could work. My recommendation to you is if you stand on the outside of your building, your home, take a look up at the window and try putting a few different things inside the window. So you could try a piece of white paper or pieces of tape. And if the white really stands out, then that's better than nothing. Or if it's a really light colored window, you might try putting something dark, like black pieces of electrical tape or something like that. Really what you need to achieve is that contrast between the marker on the window and what appears behind. So being the inside of your room or a reflection.
Okay, thanks again. And we have a review here, which is great when you were talking about all the different markers that you were using and trialing. We have someone who said that they used a white acrylic paint marker and it lasted really well. It was up last spring.
That's good to know. I hope I get the same result.
And I have another comment from someone just saying that they have a screened window at their house and a bird did damage its beak on hitting the window. That was
Yeah, that can still happen. It really does depend on the dynamics of the collision, right? If the bird hits beak first and the screen is not that far from the glass, then absolutely it can still be injured. So I would say treating your window with markers is better than using a screen, but the screen can provide some amount of safety.
Also, just sort of following up on that too, it also depends at the speed that that bird is traveling at.
Yeah.
One thing to also mention, which is important, is when you're considering that placement of where you're putting bird feeders in your house.
Mhm.
So typically, Brendon was showing us how to correctly clean your bird feeders. Also, what is really important is making sure that your bird feeders are ideally 3 feet or closer to your home. With sort of the idea there is that if your birds are landing on the feeders and then they're taking off, if it's too far away, it allows them to take off too quickly. That's when you can potentially have damage if they're going right into a window.
Yeah, that's a very good point. If a bird takes off within 3 feet, they're not going to gain enough speed to hurt themselves.
great. Thanks, Andrea and Brendon. And I have one other question here. Are there ways that members of the public can help with bird research?
Yes, absolutely. So a couple of ways. One is you can volunteer with different organizations in your community that are helping birds. Nature London is one. They offer a number of initiatives. Another way that you can help birds independently is by becoming a community scientist. So there are a number of different projects that allow you to upload data about birds. So for example, every year around the holidays, we do the Christmas bird count in London. It's one of the old, I think it's actually the longest running in all of Canada, where you go out for a walk and you count all the birds you see. There's the backyard bird count offered by Birds Canada. I've actually set up a project that tracks bird window collisions in London using this nifty little app called iNaturalist. I don't know if you've heard of it, but I'll post a link in the chat. iNaturalist basically lets you use your phone, if you have a smartphone, to take a picture of anything you encounter in nature, be it a plant, an insect, another animal, and it will identify what that is. It'll tell you the species, it'll tell you info about it, and it also adds the observation to a map. And that map can be shared with anybody. And so what I've created is this project where if a bird hits a window, if someone posts a picture of it using iNaturalist, it automatically gets sent to me and we can build a database which teaches us about where collisions are especially prone in our city.
Great. Thanks, Brendon. And I jumped into the chat here when I probably shouldn't. Someone said maybe another solution for higher windows is not to clean them and leave them dirty.
Yep, I would recommend that as well if you can. Avoid cleaning your windows. Everything on the outside of a window that you can leave there is better than nothing.
Great. Okay, great. So we'll, yeah, thanks for the iNaturalist link there too. Perfect. And we're actually going to be hearing about some of those groups you mentioned in our local group segment as well. All right. So that I think that concludes the questions we had for you. So thank you again so much for all the information you shared. So practical and just to connect it to the safety of birds. So clear.
My pleasure.
Thanks so much. So what we'll do now is we will go to our local groups feature. So every event this month, we focus on groups in London that you can learn from, volunteer with, participate in some way, just to connect you with groups that you might not know, or just familiarize yourself with things that they're doing that you might not know either. So what I'm going to do is share my screen here and show you what we have for tonight. Okay, great. So I'll start the show there. Great. Sorry, I'm just going to do one other thing. So I can, there we go. Got it. So we're starting tonight with Salthaven. And you've probably heard of Salthaven. Actually, you know what? I'm going to go back because I think I went too far. Bear with me here. All right, you know what? I'm just going to start again because I'm working on it here. We're getting there. And I just want to start at our first slide. That was the problem, but I feel like I'm back on track now. Right. Thank you for waiting for me. Great. So get to know these local groups. So we're going to start with FLAP. Brendon had mentioned FLAP. And what I'll do is just share a bit about who they are. So it stands for Fatal Light Awareness Program. It's a registered Canadian charity recognized as the authority on bird building collisions. For almost 30 years, FLAP has worked to safeguard migratory birds in the built environment through advocacy, education, policy development, research, and bird rescue. They have a network of partners. They reach across the world to promote bird safe practices and engage citizens in on-the-ground conservation. They work with researchers, wildlife conservation groups, industry professionals, governments, and members of the public to keep birds safe from the dangers of the built environment. So you see two websites there. Brendon had mentioned the birdsafe.ca website. So something that Londoners can do to make windows birds safe, in addition to and beyond what we saw tonight, you can go to the FLAP website where they have lots of articles on that, just that thing, keeping windows birds safe. But also the BirdSafe website does it too. You can participate as well in the Global Bird Rescue, which is a week-long event between September 27th and October 3rd this year, where teams and individuals around the world take to the streets to rescue injured birds that have hit windows during migration. And if you encounter a bird that's been killed or injured from hitting a window, reporting it, reporting that observation along with a photo if possible on the Global Bird Collision Mapper. So that's all on that site. Our next group for you to get to know, if you don't know them already, is Friends of the Coves Subwatershed. So that's the ESA where Andrea was tonight in her video. So it was created in 2000 as a not-for-profit charity to preserve and restore the flora, fauna, and cultural heritage of the Cove subwatershed and the Coves ESA. The coves.ca has links to public documents that deal with initiatives undertaken since the start of the organization, and you can find them on Facebook at Friends of the Coves. They also have a film on YouTube called Crusaders for the Coves, which you can look at. Let's go to our next two groups. So now here we are at Salthaven. So for Salthaven, stand by. Salthaven Wildlife Rehabilitation and Education Center, committed to the care and rehabilitation of sick, injured, orphaned, or otherwise compromised wildlife. Their goal is to return healthy animals to their natural habitat. Through education, they are dedicated to increasing public awareness about and respect for the issues affecting Canadian wildlife. They encourage the public to like, comment, and share their social media posts. They're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. You can donate supplies for their animals. Their wish list is on their website, or contribute in other ways like hosting a fundraiser. Let's move now to the last one, Nature London. Brendon mentioned them a few times tonight. They advocate for natural areas in London and offer field trips of local natural areas, as well as public talks about nature topics, including the popular Nature in the City series, which takes place each year in Wolf Performance Hall at the Central Library and will hopefully be able to resume next year. You can join public events or become a member of Nature London. You can check out their Facebook page where you can read or post local nature sightings, whether they're about birds, plants, or insects. They also have a YouTube channel where you can see just what Brendon was describing tonight, the spectacle of hundreds and hundreds of chimney swifts flying into the chimney of the Labatt factory. If you'd like to become a volunteer who counts chimney swifts or are interested in the annual butterfly count in July, check out Nature London. So thank you to all the groups and the work that they do. And so right now I'm going to hand it over to Pat Donnelly, and Pat is with the City of London, and he's here and is a member of our team for the Environmentalists in Residence, and he's going to share a few more words.
Thanks, Joanna. Yeah, just a couple of slides and just a couple of reasons why the city is supporting this whole initiative, the Environmentalist in Residence, and the great presentations that Andrea and Brendon have just done tonight. One of the underlying themes that Joanna and Andrea and I and the team thought was very a logical theme underlying all these presentations is climate change. And as you may or may not, the City of London is embarked a climate emergency action plan, which we have been working on since the beginning of the pandemic, actually, for the last year and a half. And all the webinars as part of the Environmentalist in Residence have a link to the whole discussion about climate change. This one might be a little bit more tenuous, I'll say, but really when you talk about LED lights and making sure that the lights are pointing down, lighting the area rather than pointing up, that's all about energy use. And climate change is definitely very much involving the whole discussion about energy use. The other aspect I just scratched down was Brendon mentioned the last frost is usually May 10th. We will be finding that is probably going to be changing over the years as climate change takes a hold. So the whole discussion about the birds and the environment as part of the ecosystem that we are part of and that we are wanting to manage. So just briefly, the Get Involved London website is where all the information about our efforts with the Climate Emergency Action Plan, many different ways to engage. And this isn't just about information that we're providing, this is about engagement. So there's a 2-minute survey that if you've only got 2 minutes and you want to jot down a few ideas what you'd like to share with us, there's that. There's also a little bit longer one, but takes about 10 minutes. And then there's something called a discussion primer, which is probably a much more deeper dive for those people that are really interested in the topic. And that is something that would probably take a little bit more like a half an hour to go through, but it gives you a whole breadth of options and ideas from electric vehicles to retrofitting homes, and really gives you a good picture with regards to what the possibilities are and what we as a city and as a community need to focus on. And definitely the way we heat and cool our homes and the way we drive and choose other ways of getting around the city are the two biggies with regards to greenhouse gases. And one of the aspects that our council has decided to put a target of net zero greenhouse gas emissions by the year 2050. And that is a very audacious goal, but is one that is achievable, but we need to start today to make that happen. So there's a couple of ways on that website that I'll just mention, and the next slide highlights that. A couple of ways of being, a couple of tools, I'll call them. One is the Climate Action Plan Simulator. And it sounds very high tech, but it's actually a very interesting tool, all online. And it gives you the power, you the controls to say, okay, if we retrofitted 50% of old homes in London or 25%, what impact would that have? And it judges it against feasibility financially and also feasibility as to whether we really think we can get 90% of the old homes retrofitted. Similar to transportation modes. If we put electric buses in for all our bus fleet, what impact would that have? So it's a very interesting one. We've already had about 9,000 people go through that process and some really interesting results that we're just getting a handle on. A couple of other places that have used that is Salt Spring Island, which you may know is in BC, and also Perth County, which is just north of London, so the Stratford, St. Mary's, Perth County area. The other tool that is on the website, it's not listed here, but it's the Project Neutral Calculator, and it allows you to input your household use, water use, that type of thing, and it gives you your carbon footprint. So that's another tool. We've had about 1,500 people go through that exercise and provide us with the information. And last but not least, which is on the screen here, is Green in the City. And these are a series of webinars, there are 11 of them. They just ended before April. However, they're all videotaped or recorded, and they're on the London Environmental Network's website. It was a partnership with the library and the city and LEN. And what I'll point out is those 11, there's 2 particular ones that I would recommend that if you've got a spare half an hour or 45 minutes. Catherine Hayhoe is a Canadian meteorologist, climate scientist, really good communicator. She works at Texas University down in the States, but she had a presentation that is really worthwhile, really simplifies it to, we need to talk about climate change. We need to have the conversation. And the other one is a lady by the name of Ellen Kelsey, and she's a psychologist who talks about eco-anxiety. So this whole idea of the angst that we have with climate change and this big problem, she very much simplifies it and talks about all the good news that's out there. And her book called Hope Matters is one that I know the library has, and is something that is very, very positive and talks about all the opportunities that we have, and basically we can make a difference. So those are the things I just wanted to touch on. We are hoping to get first round of engagement and input from our community by Earth Day, so the end of this month, and then we'll be going into a first draft of our climate emergency action plan, and then out for public review again for another round of engagement. So it's not too late. There will be some advertisements coming out, I think, both in radio and on the web as well, talking about that. But very much, this is a plan for the entire community of London. It's not something that the city and staff are pushing out. It's something that we as a community have to put together. So I'm very excited. I'm part of the team. I'm also very excited about the Environmentalists in Residence, and this is just number 2 of 5, I think, in total. And I'm very happy to be directly involved. So back to Joanne.
Thanks so much, Pat. Terrific. So I will hand it over to Andrea for a few last comments.
So I'd just like to say a very big thank you to Brendon. His passion for being bird friendly is certainly infectious. At least we hope it is infectious for many of you here. So thanks so much for joining us today, Brendon. And we certainly are hoping that you've joined us this evening to learn something, to do something, and even to share what you learned tonight. So making a positive impact on local biodiversity can really be done at this individual level. So even passing on what you learned tonight, maybe you can't retrofit your individual buildings, maybe, or your windows, maybe you're in an apartment building, but certainly passing on what you learned tonight can even make a difference. If you would like to register for any of our programs, go to lpl.ca/environmentalist, or you can also call the library's main number, which will be posted in the chat there. For our ESA challenge, just a reminder to use that hashtag LDNESA on either Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and also share your selfies at one or more, hopefully, of London's ESAs. We also very quickly here hope you log back on for our next event on Thursday, April 15th from 12 to 1. That is entitled Great Lakes Region Climate Change, What to Expect to be Climate Ready. I'm really excited about this event as well. We're featuring a conversation with one of my former mentors, Paul Gross. Paul is an Emmy Award-winning meteorologist for NBC News Detroit, and he's going to join us and discuss some of the local impacts of the changing climate. So thanks everybody for joining us tonight. I'll send it back over to Joanna before we log off for the night.
Nope, that's wonderful. Just again, one more thank you to everybody who planned and organized this, Lily behind the scenes, Brendon for joining us, Pat from the city. It has been lovely. It's just nice to see the turnout, but please keep the conversation going. You have my contact information from your Zoom link. You'll be hearing from us for prize draws, and we hope to see you at an ESA or at a future program. Thanks, everybody. Good night.